Now that everyone has some insight on the fields of society in Hong Kong, we shall now express our personal opinion. In my opinion, I believe that people should be treated equally. Everyone is trying to make the best out of this tough situation financially and emotionally. Many of the younger generation, or in other words, Generation Z, they understand the idea of equality. But the older generation, for example, the grandparents, they may not understand this idea yet. For example, traditionally, elders may want the children or grandchildren to have male babies instead of female because they carry the family name, whereas nowadays, lots of the younger generation understand that boys and girls are equal and it does not matter whether they carry the family name or not, whereas the older generation may still prefer to have male babies. A common culture in Hong Kong or Asian countries about gender inequality is that the girls often do not get as much resources from the elders of a family. These are all cultural perspectives of the older generation, the inequality of gender between male and female. More and more adults and new adults understand the idea of gender equality. Hence, the issue has not been as severe as before. A common cultural perspective of those in poverty are that they are filthy or dirty and mean as portrayed in different forms of the media, and children are told not to talk to them. Everyone should participate in more activities to increase awareness of them. For example, community service community service and means of globalization. A common perspective shared by a lot of people around the world is that clothes make the man, and people judge your level of wealth through your clothing, items you may use, your living standards, for example. I believe that people should really drop this and actually start caring about them instead of judging them. In Hong Kong, it is actually very common to see beggars on the street. If you are in Jordan or in Tsim Sha Tsui, I believe that we should do more to help them, even though it may be just small change or 10 Hong Kong dollars, because the small amount of money can provide them a free meal or even change their life. Back in February or March, where there's a scarcity of masks, a lot of Hong Kong people are actually very willing to donate masks to those who are unable to afford them. And here's a question for everyone. How much of us actually do that? Personally, I think that we should all give them change if we happen to have it. I haven't seen as much discrimination towards ethnic minorities as of now, but I know that globally this is a huge issue and more people around the world are stepping up for this, which is a very good thing. A common cultural perspective shared by Cantonese people, for example in Hong Kong or Macau, is that the Southeast Asians or Indians and Indonesians are also dirty and unhygienic for the simple fact that they are less developed countries or they are newly industrialized countries. Hence, in Hong Kong, there is also inequality for them when they are doing social activities or purchasing goods, and people will make fun of them for their accent. Again, I suspect this is mostly due to the media, since a long time ago. A cultural perspective shared by the younger generation is that some of the elderly are often patronizing, and many of the younger generation also disrespect them for this reason. So many of the families leave the elderly in elderly homes or let them live on their own and not give them any money to live. So this causes poverty for them. It is also up to everyone in the community to step up against poverty and inequality. A global perspective of what other countries may view Hong Kong is that Hong Kong people are blend between the East and the West, and hence they also appreciate the culture in Hong Kong. And they also think that Hong Kong people help each other out. Yet Hong Kong people may be perceived as being by others. There's a saying online is that Hong Kong is where Western and Eastern culture coexist. Hence, people around the world may think that Hong Kong do not discriminate anyone and treat everyone with equal respect, and this is mostly accurate, except for some of the issues that have been mentioned.
There are increasing concerns that poverty has reached an unacceptable level in Hong Kong. No matter if you are a low-income worker, a child, elderly, woman, or ethnic minority, all people in the community should be treated fairly, no matter what kind of situation they're in. Women are disproportionately affected by poverty. In order to fully engage society and bring skilled workers into the workforce, Hong Kong people might think that the education and protection must be put in place for all women and young girls. Furthermore, the poor are treated very unfairly compared to the other people in Hong Kong. To add on this point, the wealth distribution to different groups of people in Hong Kong are very uneven. Poor people in Hong Kong will think that they should be treated equally, for example, by giving poor kids good and free education, so that they could contribute to society when they grow up. A lot of Hong Kong people might think that it's the responsibility of the government to provide all resources to the people in need, as they don't have the ability to take care of themselves.
People living in poverty often also suffer from poor living standards, which means they may have to live in subdivided flats or even sleep in the streets. For many Hong Kongers, it is a top priority to buy a house. It is well known in Hong Kong that the price of a place to live is very expensive due to having such a high population density in a small area. People who might have enough money to buy a place to live in other countries might not be able to do so in Hong Kong. Poor living standards also affect the health of the people who live in poverty. They might not get 3 meals a day, or even a steady supply of clean water. It should be a priority of the government to improve the lives of these people. The amount of people who don't have a place to live will only increase, and this is a problem the government needs to work to solve.
As statistics show, 1 out of 5 people is under the poverty line in Hong Kong. I think that is a very ridiculous statistic, as we can imagine the poverty gap between the rich and the poor. As we all know, housing in Hong Kong is really expensive, so government provides public housing and public school for people who cannot afford a house, and not to mention sending their children to a private school for better education. Despite the government trying, there are still many people in poverty, and it's not fully the government's fault since they do not have the money to help. In Hong Kong, many old people are forced to work even after retiring age since they do not earn enough money to sustain life after retiring. Some elderly runs out of money and have no choice to be a beggar, while some are more lucky and can sustain life by picking up cardboard from the street, and few can just rely on their next generation on feeding them. Another common topic is poor people not treated fairly. Conversation nowadays revolve around how much money you make, how big is your house, etc. This shows people's value towards money in the societies that revolve around money. It's natural for people to be treated unfairly.
I believe that relative poverty is really bad, that rich are disrespecting the poor. For example, the rich demand more rent on stalls and markets, and the poor have nowhere else to work. As long as relative poverty is not an issue, I think everything will be solved. Uh, a lot of people don't know that generational poverty is a big issue. They just believe that education is the main reason that why people become poor, and the middle class tell their children the wrong fact. I hope that high and middle income people don't manipulate their children on studying harder and ruin their children's dreams. This is the end of our second podcast. If you don't want to miss our third and last podcast, like and subscribe the channel and hit that notification button. Thank you.